Before the modern toothbrush existed, humans' oral hygiene depended on a frayed piece of wood, a rag dipped in soot, or a mixture of crushed eggshells and animal bones. In such an era, a single tooth infection was a terrifying, life-threatening situation. Without a way to clear bacteria from the mouth, simple tooth decay could easily travel to the bloodstream, causing absolute havoc inside the body and eventual death. But how did humans transition from a primitive piece of wood into the modern object sitting in your bathroom right now? This is the history of the toothbrush. Thousands of years ago, in the ancient landscapes of Babylonia and Egypt, around 3500 BC, the world was expanding, great cities were being built, and humanity was discovering the power of agriculture. People were eating more grains, more cooked foods, and more sugars. But as the human diet evolved, a new problem emerged. Teeth began to rot, gums bled, with gout and horrific mouth infections becoming an everyday reality. A simple piece of wood, the chew stick, or a miswak, one of the earliest invented tools to fight back against decay, was made. To use it, an ancient Egyptian or Babylonian would take a twig from a specific tree, often the Salvadora persica tree, and spend hours chewing on one end until the wood fibers separated. Once the end became frayed and soft, it formed a rough brush. They would rub this frayed wood against their teeth to scrape away food particles and plaque. These specific twigs contained natural oils that acted as a mild antiseptic, helping to fight off bacteria. But there was a massive problem. The simple chew stick was no longer efficient. It couldn't reach the deep crevices between teeth and didn't possess the flexibility to clean the back molars effectively. Worse, the abrasive nature of scraping raw wood against human flesh began to tear the gums apart. As gums receded and tore, bacteria found an even faster gateway directly into the bloodstream. Humans were desperately trying to clean their mouths, but their primitive tool was inefficient and caused agonizing infections. The chew stick was failing, and humans needed a tool that could actually flex, bend, and scrub away the microscopic killers hiding in the dark corners of the human jaw. So how did ancient humans bridge the gap between a clumsy piece of wood and a true bristle brush? The answer is found halfway across the world in Imperial China. In 1498, deep within the walls of Imperial China, an inventor working under the Ming Dynasty realized that humanity's oral tools were missing a vital element. While wood was too rigid and rags were too soft, a tool simultaneously incredibly tough, completely flexible, and thin enough to slip between teeth was needed to truly clean a human mouth. He took a thick piece of animal bone, carved it into a narrow handle, and drilled dozens of tiny holes into one end. Then he stuffed thick neck bristles of a wild Siberian hog into the tiny drilled holes of the bone handle, creating the first true bristle toothbrush. But it didn't work immediately for the rest of the world. For centuries, this incredible invention remained isolated in Asia. When Western travelers and merchants encountered the Chinese bristle toothbrush and brought it back to Europe, the Europeans were completely horrified. The idea of putting coarse, dirty animal hair, especially from a pig, into their mouths was seen as barbaric and unsanitary. They simply refused to use it. Instead, wealthy Europeans stuck to their old habits, rubbing their teeth with luxury silk rags dipped in acidic solutions, or using expensive powders made of ground pumice stone that literally stripped the protective enamel right off their teeth. As a result, while China had improved oral health, Europe entered a dark age of dental rot. By the 1700s, it was common for even kings and queens to have entirely black, rotting teeth and foul breath. The world had the technology, but human stubbornness was keeping it out of reach, and it took a man in a London prison to finally convince the Western world to take oral hygiene seriously. If you've made it this far, you're the kind that loves history of everyday object. Hit on the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel for new episode every week. I'd appreciate your effort. All right, let's get back to history. In 1770, inside the damp, disease-ridden stone walls of Newgate Prison in London, a man named William Addis had been arrested for inciting a riot. Inside the prison, hygiene was non-existent. Every morning, Addis watched his fellow prisoners wake up and clean their mouths by rubbing rags covered in soot and salt over their teeth. It was an ineffective practice that did nothing to stop their gums from rotting away. Realizing he needed a better way to clean his mouth or risk life-threatening oral infection that would claim his life long before his sentence was over, he made a plan. One night after a meager meal of meat, Addis saved a small bone left on his plate and hid it in his clothes. Addis carefully carved the beef bone into a thin handle, drilled tiny holes into the top of the bone, and pushed tightly wire-bound boar bristles deep into the holes, sealing them with glue. When William Addis walked out of Newgate Prison, he founded a company and mass-produced the toothbrushes he had made, and soon became very rich. Soon, factories across England were churning out thousands of toothbrushes a year, leading to a massive shift in society oral hygiene. But just as the toothbrush was becoming a standard household item, human history took an unexpected turn. An unprecedented dental crisis that the old bone and hair toothbrushes were completely unequipped to handle. As the 19th century transitioned into the 20th century, sugar suddenly became incredibly cheap and widely available to the masses. Industrial factories began pumping out mass-market candies, soft sodas, processed white bread, and sweet pastries. Society was consuming historic amounts of sugar, and the bacteria inside the human mouth were throwing an absolute feast. Dental decay exploded like a rampant epidemic. The solution, everyone assumed, was the trusty bone and hair toothbrush. But a dark secret about natural animal hair came to light. Natural hairs are not solid, they are hollow tubes. After brushing, these hollow tubes soak up water, saliva, and microscopic bits of food. Because animal hair takes a long time to dry, the inside of the toothbrush bristles became a damp breeding ground for deadly bacteria. People were using toothbrushes to clean their mouths, but were also reintroducing millions of living germs back into their gums every single time they brushed. The very tool meant to save them was harboring the enemy. During the onset of World War I, countries had a massive military crisis. Hundreds of thousands of young recruits were showing up to the battlefields with teeth so rotten and infected they couldn't chew military rations. Others were deemed unfit for service or required extensive dental treatment before they could be deployed. In 1938, inside the laboratories of a company called DuPont, scientists invented a miracle material, the nylon. Suddenly, the world was introduced to a brush that was completely sterile, completely uniform, and incredibly cheap to manufacture. Nylon didn't absorb water, nor rot, nor hollow out to hold bacteria. It dried almost instantly, making it the first truly sanitary toothbrush in human existence. But despite this technological leap, a massive obstacle remained. Most everyday citizens still didn't brush their teeth regularly. They lacked the daily discipline to use them. The habit just wasn't ingrained in the global psyche. That all changed in World War II, when millions of young American and Allied soldiers were drafted and sent overseas. The military high command implemented strict hygiene rules. Every single soldier was issued a plastic, nylon-bristled toothbrush as a mandatory piece of their combat gear. They were ordered to brush their teeth daily under strict military discipline to prevent infection outbreaks in the trenches. When the war ended and the soldiers returned home to their families, they brought that intense daily discipline back with them. Within a single generation, toothbrushing transformed from a rare, irregular chore into an absolute, non-negotiable cultural law. For centuries, society struggled with preventable dental infections. They chewed on bitter twigs, rubbed their gums with harsh soot, and endured the agony of rotting teeth without any hope of relief. Today, we rarely think about the dangers of a toothache. We don't live in fear that a simple cavity will end our lives. But the only reason we enjoy this incredible peace of mind, and the reason we can smile with health and confidence, is because of the centuries of trial, error, and sheer human ingenuity locked inside that simple, humble toothbrush resting in your bathroom cabinet.